Welcome to episode 262 of Spike Drop. We're here to talk about Loud winning the Valorant Champions that just happened like 3 hours ago. Oh my god, Brazil. Holy shit. Let's go, baby. I only watched one map. Shit happened. Woo!
Was it Poggers?
Isn't that the recap? People were like, hey, you guys got to do a tournament recap? I'm like, yeah, we are. We just wanted to wait till the finals are done in Istanbul. It wasn't done yet, guys. It wasn't done.
Yeah.
Is that good enough for you, Yiska?
Yeah. I enjoyed that. Like for those not in the know, like 5 seconds before hitting record, I taunted AVRL into debating, and then AVRL said, "I'm not going to debate, therefore debate you." And then he debated me, and therefore I'm on level 3 debated right now.
Yeah. I also want you to know that I wasn't going to do anything. I was just going to do a regular intro until you prompted me. I'm like, ah, shit.
No,
I think of something in 5 seconds. I'm going to think of something in 5 seconds. So I literally thought of something in 5 seconds and just went with it.
Based.
That's what I thought of. All right. Well, from the golden carpet to whatever this is online, it's 262 of TCP. No, we didn't get to talk about Summer Showdown in our last episode because Big Boy Overwatch 2 news came out, and it's like, well, you kind of have to talk about that, right? And if you're going to talk about that, hard to bundle that up with a recap episode at the same time, because it'll either be a 5-hour long podcast episode, or you're not going to talk about either for long enough. Even though, as I'm sure you'll see in the timestamps below, this is probably not a super long episode. I say that as I'm about to curse us into another 4-hour podcast on this. We'll see. We'll figure it out as we go along. We are going to skip drama today, so we decided to just kind of bank up and save the drama for this upcoming week's normal episode. So yes, we are aware the new Spark signings, Piggy Charge, No Hills departed, blah, all of that. We know all of that. We're gonna save that for the normal episode coming up. Sure, there'll be plenty to bundle that with, and who knows, maybe there'll be a couple more changes as we start to head into Countdown Cup proper, and see if there's some more news along the way before we get into talking about the next tournament. But while we got a little bit of time, this is probably the last chance to talk with Summer Showdown. 2 winners, 2 regional winners, East and West, and we had a live event in Toronto, of which Joe definitely went to, and all looked pretty good. So, any further intros before we kick it off?
I'll say this. I was not there.
Damn.
I know some people who were. But even with not being there, this only furthers my kind of indignation and opinion that Overwatch 2 specifically, is built to be in a live capacity. I know that
Is that all esports though?
I think it is, but I think that's not fair to say, because I know that obviously like the meme, like Valorant, I get it, like Counter-Strike as well as like an incredible viewing and spectator experience. But
every you know what I'm saying, that every esport is better live though, right?
It is. I think we're in a weird parallel world where now I'm going to like both criticize and defend the geolocation franchise model, because while the execution was faulty, what it did do was create very fervent and passionate fans day one. When you live in the States and you kind of have that home team, you're gonna show up. You're gonna show out. Like you don't care what player is there. Like because it's your home base. That's your home team. Like people are very passionate about showing up for that. So I think we're in a very odd, ethereal place. As I pull out my microphone, we're in an odd, ethereal place where
That was ethereal and odd.
Odd is for sure. Where you can have a heightened experience because of, both like having home teams and home rivals. I think we are getting to that point where we can kind of talk about some of these teams as being rivals to these other teams. And that isn't just like a forced narrative. It's just like, herdy-der, we're the Gladiators and the Valiant, but we have no beef. And like, just because we're in the same place, like it's a natural thing, but it doesn't like feel that way. It's grown into that. You have like the Canadian teams kind of backing each other, which is really cool to see. And it's dope. I don't know. I really feel passionate about like having live events really return. So much so that I think like maybe a studio should be in the cards for Overwatch 2. I don't know. I haven't really thought too much on that, but Toronto was really dope to watch, as much as maybe the meta wasn't as great as we would have hoped.
Yeah. I also think like it's really cool for Toronto that they had their best tournament showing ever in front of their home crowd. Played very good Overwatch there. And I think that's nice to see. I think there's something to be figured out. Like, of course, I don't know the financials there. Unfortunately, like the situation of having to broadcast at 3 p.m. local on a Thursday is probably not going to get your stadium filled to the brim for those days. Maybe there's a workaround for that. But yeah, generally speaking, I think this was a success. I hope Defiant can also find that there was some financial justifications given behind, hosting homestands, because I know like that it's really hard to become profitable with these, and then you got to factor in the loyalty that you're building and the type of brand adhesion that you're building, which has to be factored in. But I think overall, like Toronto were a great host. In general, I also thought like some of the criticism around like what kind of practice environments these players were in, you guys don't know. Like this is really like it was entirely okay. It was even entirely okay
the
for
bathroom
other
setup.
Yeah, it was even. I mean, bathroom. It's it's where professional sports. What's it called? The It's not the bathroom, right? It's the room where the teams go to locker room, right? There were locker rooms. So, other esports had these situations before where you just set up, workstations in the locker room. Of course, like there's other stuff that I heard behind the scenes, but I mean, all in all, it logistically worked out. All of these will always have some issue in terms of like the amount of PPAs that you have, accommodations, like internet connections, making sure everyone shows up for practice. And like you're on the road. It's not going to be an ideal scenario as if you were at home, but that some things have to give in order to make this possible. And I think, like for instance, once again, I found casters like Uber absolutely feed off the crowd and make it a different experience when they can soak up the atmosphere of a stadium, especially like for when casting home teams. And I'm sure also it's a good experience for all the new casters that maybe haven't casted arenas of that size. So all in all, like there's a lot of value being created that doesn't necessarily probably directly translate into dollars, but it just enhances the experience, right?
It's a good Optic look. I mean, like in terms of ironic because Optic lost, but no, it's a good look in terms of optics where people want to be part of esport when things are cool. People want to trend up with whatever's cool and whatever is popular. And so
yes,
it's just I don't know the financials behind it either, but if it looks good and people are happy with it and it makes people excited and makes people want to be part of the esport, that's only a positive thing.
Yep.
Do we know details on ticket sales? Because I know Kickoff Clash sold out for Dallas in Arlington.
Mm-hmm. Good question.
I don't know.
Not sure. I think
So
also
I'd be curious because like I wonder if Dallas made much if they broke even or made a profit off their event because they did sell out apparently. So
I mean, they are hosting in the next Dallas against Houston match online, right? Like,
Yeah.
So that's happening in the regular season, I believe, the Battle of Texas. So I assume, like, even if they weren't directly making money, they have some reason to further pursue this and creates more of the brand there. So, like, you wouldn't do this if you didn't believe it was going to give you some benefit, right?
Yeah. So whether they're making a profit or a loss here, they are clearly motivated to do more events.
Yes.
And Eric is bringing up they're getting Taimu and Mickey in.
Mhm.
So I mean, shit, they're definitely investing into the event.
Type.
See, Joe, no, you have to go to an event. You have to go to at least one. They're bringing
Oh,
Taimu
I mean,
and Mickey in.
I've been to a live Overwatch event, and I plan on going to finals. Pending what those details look like. It's kind of my excuse to kind of go out and actually like socialize for a weekend. So
well, here's a leak for you. Chris Chung revealed at the Shock event that it's somewhere in California. So there you go. Enjoy that, Joe. Enjoy that little information.
Nice,
sir.
No, don't thank me. Thank Chris Chung. So
thank you, Captain Chung.
Everyone's like, "Who's Chris Chung?" It's like he's actually the GM of the Shock. Like, see, I told you, most of you don't even know who the GM of the Shock is. It's not Andy Miller. It's not Corey. It's Chris Chung. He's the GM of the Shock. And now you know. 5 years later. All right, we're happy with that.
Yeah.
Let's move on to let's get into it. Let's get into the actual episode. 262, brought to you by Avril Vista Bebe, Battlecrab, Refine Bean, Bronzebot Buha, Picasso, Chris R34444, Cash 67, Lolshin, Porkchop Sammy, Rexane, and Volamel Smooth Nuts, with YouTube members Iceham, Jello, William, Jesse, Vishman, Fireman 6, aka and Chris R. Since we're already kind of talking about Toronto, let's kind of dive into Toronto being the event. We're going to talk about the team as well in a second. Let's talk about the actual tournament itself now, kind of like how that all went down. So, looking at the west side of things, let's just start on day one. We don't have to go through every single game, but it's more so just a feel for how each day went or any specific games you guys want to touch up on. I'll start on day one. What a surprising match, number one. Dallas versus Washington went the full 5, and you know what? Washington got reverse swept again. I just saw a really interesting stat line. Someone on Reddit brought this up, and someone who's done a really good job of collating these statistics. But Washington is currently the team in 2022 with the highest amount of matches, where they have been reverse swept by the other team, where they've been the victim of a reverse sweep.
Really?
After that, it's like Gladiators and Fusion, and I think one or two other teams tied second. So of course, Fusion's second place, even in being reverse swept. Can't help it, can they? They just got to keep the narrative going. But yeah, Washington have been reverse swept 3 times, and a bunch of teams at 2, and then some at 1. So, but it's wild that again, probably you'd say one of the bottom 2 teams from NA going to the event came close to almost beating the champion. I mean, fuck it. Washington took more maps
more games than
the
Shock
did.
Yeah.
Forget anybody else. I'm just even singling out the Shock. But yeah, that's true, because the only other team that played Dallas was London, who took 1. Washington took 2. London took 1. Shock took 0 off of Dallas.
Yeah.
The team that nearly beat the Fuel was the Justers. What?
And kind
What's
of
going on there?
Recall back to like the start of this meta and like the big like shocking like 3-minute push just stalemate between Justice and Shock, right? I think past that point, Justice was like very much. I'm gonna refer to it this way, like buying into like the Dallas train of thought, where it was like we need to take aggressive like neutral fights. We want to try to get ahead of the tempo. We want to try to set the tempo and like get this snowball moving across the board. You look at their control games, like Assassin flying off the top ropes, just diving into these teams, and then his team following up behind him in these neutral fights without any kind of like win condition, which I thought was really, really like it stood out like a sore thumb when compared to the Shock that was a lot more methodical, focusing on rotations. Toronto, I thought as well, very like positionally focused. That tried to take these neutral fights with a little bit more grace, tried to be a little bit more soft about it. Whereas Justice and Dallas were like leading the charge and just like pounding, like battering rams.
You saying that the way to victory is to smork really hard?
I think that's
just full booger smorking to the team.
I think there is some zug me go face in Overwatch, and I think there like that is a like prevailing thought. Going all the way back to GOATs, that it's like passive Overwatch, slow Overwatch is just so hard to do that as long as all 5 fingers are like doing a mistake correctly, it usually turns out to be pretty successful. Proactivity is so very underrated in this game. And I think you saw that on display when you look at the Justice in their qualification run and Dallas throughout their entire tournament. They're always trying to take these fights. They're always trying to set the tempo, forcing fights in spaces that they're very comfortable with. And I think when you do that, you end up like forcing a lot of errors. You force out a lot of cooldowns. And in metagames like this, you can't really afford to just have a dead Dragon Blade or a dead Blizzard or a dead Beat or a dead Rally. Like you need all the value that you can get. And I think to me, it was not a surprise it was mildly surprising to see the Justice take them that close. But I suspected that Justice were going to be like underrepresented in terms of like community precedent. And I think like you saw them actually shot and do all right for themselves, especially with all the stuff that's gone on.
Speaking of deadbeats, no, I'm actually not going to bring up any specific team. I was just not going to throw anybody under the bus like that.
Good coward.
Instead, I'm just going to praise Washington Justice for, I don't know, just like performing well above expectations. For a team that like went 0-2, they still lost to both the teams they faced. But then again, they lost to Dallas, who came first, and Toronto,
and then the home team.
And I don't think anyone expected them to do anything. Like, if you were to name the bottom 2 teams, you would have said Mayhem and Washington easy.
Yes.
Right? That's number 7, number 8, no particular order, but number 7, number 8, I think, for me anyway. We'll get to Mayhem in a second because they also kind of outperform that position.
Well, yeah.
But, man, like, it's not even just a 5-mapper versus Dallas. It's the fact they got 2-0 and then forced Dallas to reverse sweep. Like, that's crazy to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Like Washington continue to just be like a team that you should count out because they're entirely stripped of like everything.
Yeah.
They have no reason to be good. They have no. I don't know if you're saying they're good. They have no reason to be competitive, and yet somehow they will get a 2-0 lead versus Dallas, the best team in the meta. Unbelievable. I can't imagine how any of that works. Can't fault them for losing to Toronto. I mean, 3rd place team, home team. Toronto's better equipped. Toronto's a higher budget team. Toronto's just meant to be a better team on paper. They are a better team on paper. They're a better team execution on the day as well. So that's a game that you would have tipped Toronto anyway. So yeah, curious to see how Washington do in future events because I think like if there's going to be a time where their lack of flexibility will get punished. Countdown Cup and what I project the meta will be moving to that will probably start to really strain their team in terms of the flexibility of each individual member.
Gotcha.
Was there another match on day 1 anyone wanted to bring up, or should we move on to the next day?
Not particularly. Everything kind of went like per game script. No.
I will say it is actually scary how London copy pasted their not Summer Show. What's the tournament before? Mid-Season Madness results. So they beat the 3rd place team that makes the big run through the lower bracket final, loses to the eventual winners, and then loses to Florida again to flunk out of the tournament.
And another map 5.
Yes.
Was it map 5 in mid-season? Yeah, it's another map 5. Dude, I think I figured it out. London is like the bogey team with the Atlanta Reign, even though the last time Reign did beat them. That's fine. Typically speaking, London have been the bogey team of the Reign. But then for whatever reason, Florida the bogey team of the London Spitfire.
Yeah.
Every time.
It's true.
Every time.
It's true, yeah. Yeah, I don't even know why that is. Why that seems to be an unfavorable matchup.
It's hard to say.
And it was a reverse sweep as well. Fuck's sake.
Yeah.
it gets even funnier. I don't know.
To be fair, like I think for a lot of players at both teams, like this was probably their first big LAN, so there's some volatility expected, I guess. In the
No, Florida went to KC. You remember? Florida went to Dallas kickoff.
right, true, yes,
They
true.
did have that. Yeah.
Yeah, and
London,
then,
I'll say, it was their first actual LAN, if you don't count Hawaii in front of a crowd. So,
and even there they had some issues, right? Delivering. So my bad. Sorry. But
yeah, say that all again so I can understand what you just said.
He was vaping, audio listeners. You didn't hear him, but he was vaping. He's
Yeah,
smoking that
definitely
booth
vaping.
back. You know, we'll get to his comments.
Definitely, yeah. No, like London did underperform a little bit, or it felt like that during mid-season madness, right? Like if you beat the Atlanta Reign, then that assumes like a certain level, and then okay, losing against the Shock is all fine. Even was probably not a bad match there, and then going 3-2 against Florida Mayhem, like that felt like I think they themselves thought they should have done better at mid-season. To lose this one again is pretty rough, I think, for them, because I think they think of themselves as a better team generally, and then to be
I'd say so, yeah.
reverse swept like that, it has to be rough.
I can't wait for the content because Florida usually they did content for Kickoff Clash. It was pretty cool to watch. I think they did content for mid-season. And they usually do. They'll have done content for Summer Showdown as well, so it'll be fun to watch their reactions to all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But okay, so we might as well move into the second day here. What about Vancouver? Was this not a team that we maybe expected? Because where did you guys have a team like Vancouver? Because I would have said that this is more like a 5th, 6th kind of place team, not a 7th, 8th, right? In my opinion,
Yeah,
I would have had Vancouver above Washington and Florida, and yet Vancouver ended up being next to Justice, one of the first 2 teams knocked out.
Yeah.
I think when
Tony
you talk
won
about
that.
underperformers, I think you kind of have to point to the Vancouver Titans. Unfortunately, I really stand by, I think, some of our comments prior to the tournament, where we kind of like you said, we kind of point to them as a team that could have like a surprising performance. Like, I don't think if we play this online or if we play this like 100 times that like Vancouver loses to Florida or Florida overperforms as much as they did. That's not to say that like we should be discrediting Florida. I think that they surprised me, and we'll kind of get to them when we, dive deep into their run, but I don't think Vancouver showed up, if I'm going to be completely honest. I think that, power rankings are there for a reason, and Vancouver looked good coming into this event, but I just don't know if they showed up on stage. I'm not sure.
Well, that's because for this team, they literally is their first LAN.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, they don't have that much experience. Well, I mean, aside from guys like Master, right?
Yeah.
And maybe Mirror.
And they really needed that additional point, right? Like, they're currently 2 points behind Boston.
Well,
Boston
they got one free
there.
point from just making the tournament, do they? So,
Yeah. Like they
have to be second place to get another point. I mean, I don't think they were ever going to get second place.
Yeah.
So they got as many points as they were able to get that tournament.
Is that true? Oh yeah, okay. Then in that case, yeah.
So it's 1 for everybody. Second gets 2. First gets 3.
Yeah.
So Vancouver, in my mind, maxed out on points. Like they're not going to get second place. So that's okay.
What's the rest of their schedule like? Let me.
Pretty good. I think the rest of the schedule is good. Probably not as easy as the schedule they just had, but I think it's going to be fine.
Sorry.
Compared to the first 2 tournament schedules they had.
True.
Holy shit, the first 2 tournaments destroyed them.
So this one is rough. It's like 50-50. So they have London, they have Gladiators, they have Fuel, they have Toronto, they have Florida, and they have Paris.
Ah, shucks, that's 0-6. That's fucked. That's unlucky, dude.
No, they're winning against Paris, but like you would have liked to play Boston.
I think Paris is a gimme. I think Boston could be a team that comes up. I hate
Paris,
that this is. I wish Paris was on the come up, but I think that a team like the Uprising, maybe even a team like Justice, they're probably more likely to. And I hate that this is like the analysis that we have to give, but we're recording this prior to the patch notes, right? We don't know what this can, the Countdown Cup patch is going to be. So
Well,
it's
some people don't know.
Some people.
Yeah.
Hello, it's me.
Oh, I don't know.
And not know her.
I'm not saying I do know.
I would certainly hope some people would know.
Some people don't know.
I'll give you the Scrimbox on Wednesday, but I can tell you, Jotes is dead.
Based.
We're saved.
100%.
Yeah.
I can tell you, Contenders Korea, if you're watching this when it comes out, Contenders Korea is probably on the same day, or the next. I mean, they're already on the new patch. I mean, there's less than, it's like 12 hours away, man, from the time of this recording. It fucking doesn't really matter that I say this now. It's like, by the time you hear it, the Contenders Korea would have already played anyway. They're on the Countdown Cup patch already. They're not even finishing off Jotes. They're not even finishing off the season with Jotes. They're just straight up on the Countdown Cup patch. So you're about to see some real Countdown Cup shit. I think the patch will at that point have been revealed anyway. So being all cloak and dagger about patch notes at this stage is probably a bit redundant when you're about to see some real gameplay on that patch from the time of this recording, about fucking 12 hours from now.
And I can tell you from what I've heard so far in Overwatch League and scrims, at least at the start of this week, or mid of this week rather. So on Wednesday, we're currently recording on Sunday. They played pretty much stuff that was played in stage 2.
I'll also tell you this.
Okay.
Despite Yiska just listing out a bunch of dates, I think he maybe doesn't understand what day it is for us currently, because we're not actually recording the Countdown Cup episode yet.
Right.
So we're just, you know what, we can, the previews already, Yiska. That's a big no. We haven't even finished talking about Summer Showdown yet.
I love it so much.
I know you do. You know, you are the new Halo. Even though Halo came back, fuck it, you're my Halo, okay?
Okay. See ya, Halo.
And yeah. If you like. And shit, I lost my train of thought now. You fucked me up.
The sneaky Beyonce.
Oh yeah, I got it. Yeah, I'm not gonna let you escape Jotes that easy. If I have to cast one more game of Jotes, which I do because Contenders Australia got delayed and it has to be replayed this week, so I actually have to cast one more game of Goats. Fuck me. Hopefully I won't be sick by the time that happens. Yeah. You have to suffer Jotes with me a little bit longer as well on this podcast, as we have to finish talking about Summer Showdown. And getting back on topic, so we were last talking about Vancouver Titans. Probably, I don't know. Part of me is disappointed that it didn't get further, but part of me is also like, it's their first tournament. They spent most of the year losing. They're probably a bit jittery coming into this. Losing to Shock is whatever. Like that's probably always going to happen. Losing to Mayhem, I don't even think losing to Mayhem is that crazy. What I think is crazy is a 3-0 sweep. That's what I think is crazy. Right? Like,
yes, I agree.
Surely Vancouver don't get swept by Florida. I think I'm not being fair to Florida here. I'm maybe downplaying Florida a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, when I'm talking about it like this, I'm mostly criticizing Vancouver, not so much downplaying Florida. Because I'm about to spend a bit of time complimenting Florida after this when we talk about them in more detail. But yeah, my final thoughts on Vancouver is just, I think we all expected a little bit more, but not entirely surprised given that this is their first tournament. And I think they still got a bit to build on. You've outlined their Countdown Cup schedule, probably pretty rough. Okay, maybe not 0-6, but shit, there's a few good teams in there. And Glads are about to make a major comeback in terms of like meta proficiency when they can put like Rhino back on his good dive heroes and Shu gets to come back on an Ana or something. Like, holy fuck, that's going to be crazy. On top of the Happy playing good Happy stuff. Yeah, I mean, that being said, like, as I mentioned, Vancouver maxed out on points. For me, this was just going to be like, well, how far do they get? How much experience can they obtain from this tournament? Because, okay, sure, there's prize money, and prize money is important. Of which they missed out on those. So the bottom two teams don't get any prize money. You don't get more points for making it deeper unless you get second place, and these teams are not capable of getting second place. So I think they can't be too upset.
Yeah, true.
Just got to say more there. I ended up in a coughing fit. That's fine. We'll move on. Do we talk about Houston next and save Florida for a little bit longer? Because
Sure.
Houston also kind of dropped out kind of quick.
Yes,
Did you
but
say the Houston... What?
I feel like really only the Toronto series is a problem.
Would you say that's an upset?
No.
Was my question. No.
I think
Meta?
maybe the closeness is an upset, because when you look at like the pieces needed to play this meta, you look at Merit, you look at, you look at their flex DPS, you look at Pelican, this is somebody who's been basically trying, not forcing Genji, but has like found a lot of comfort within Genji for like the
So
season as
you
a
can't
whole.
say force Genji
No.
in this meta. That would
Definitely
not be
isn't
the right
forcing Genji here, but in stage 1, stage 2, like when we've needed, Houston to come out and play a little bit of Tracer, Pelican's done so to like, mild results, but then like found a lot of success with Genji. So when you talk about like mid to long range hit scan, Merit's great. You look at like Genji being a staple, you're like Poggers, Pelican, we're fucking off to the moon, fucking Bitcoin, BitConnect, whatever the fuck you want to talk about, Poggers. I think where maybe the disconnect happened was maybe the entry of Lep and Doge, Dante kind of coming back into the fold, playing the Junker Queen. That adjustment period could have like hampered them. So it's a little disappointing, but when you have the hometown buff, when you have, a team like Toronto playing good Overwatch, like you can't really fault them. I think Hisu is finding himself in a revitalization as I mean this with all the love and respect in the world, but like he's now probably a top like hit scan role player, right? Like he is in the like ONS DM category of like, oh, we need like an Ashe or a Widow or a Sojourn, but like I don't really want him on the Tracer. He's not super
It's
flexible.
kind of wild because Arns doesn't play 2 out of the 3 heroes you just listed, but
definitely doesn't. But like the vibe, the feeling that you get from him, I think they are finding some success with Hisu in those roles. So it's not an upset for me that Toronto wins, but I think Houston probably, 99 out of 100 times probably scores a couple maps, makes us a little bit closer.
So you would have tipped Toronto to win anyway. Like all things being equal, you would have tipped Toronto to win. Maybe
not necessarily tip Toronto. I think in my bracket, I had Houston going deeper. But to me, it's not like necessarily an upset to see Toronto win. I think it's like it was a close matchup in my mind. I gave the edge to Houston because I didn't want to put a ton of weight into the home crowd buff. But when you are playing good Overwatch and you have the home team kind of like buffing you and maybe debuffing your enemy, maybe there is some success to that. Maybe there's something quantifiable there. It's just hard for me as a little monkey man to figure that out.
I think they probably caught Toronto on a huge upswing as well. Like this is the best performance we've ever seen out of Toronto.
For sure.
Home crowd buff is obviously pretty, but this is why I don't know, I tipped Toronto pretty highly, generally speaking, the tournament, because I knew the home crowd buff would be pretty strong. It usually is. Yeah, Toronto have a lot to prove here as well. I don't know.
And let's be honest, like Houston would have beaten Florida again, and they would have been third for this tournament if they get past Toronto, right? That would have happened.
Houston would beat Florida and come third.
Yeah.
That probably was, I mean, if we assume Mayhem just lose to either team, then that was probably the game to decide third, right?
I mean, they beat Florida on day 1, 3-0, pretty clean.
Right.
So it was probably like, yeah. I think what Houston, I think if you look at that game, it was probably not one of the better ones that Merit played. So a bit of an off game there, fair enough. I think if those teams play each other at like peak potential of them in this meta, it becomes an interesting match. I think like the problem is the 3-0 score here that should have probably not been as one-sided.
Trying to figure out if this is disappointing for Houston. What has been Houston's best result so far? Because I feel like they dropped out pretty not quickly in the midseason madness, but they also didn't really make it that far.
Let's see.
I guess Houston's best result is beating Dallas in week 1. No, how far they get in kickoff clash? They kind of dropped out the same place. Yeah, they're stuck in this 5th, 6th position at all times, you know?
Yeah.
This season, 7th, 8th. Okay, we had some APAC teams in there, so they couldn't quite make it as far. They're kind of stuck in that middle of the pack for tournaments. Like they never get within, you know, any of the middle positions. Or even like a 4th place, you know, they just seem to always fall short of even a 4th. Whereas I think across the year so far, I think I can comfortably say it feels like Houston have been more of like a NA top 5 kind of deal, right? Generally speaking. Which means
So,
5th,
yeah.
6th is probably not in 5th, 6th is probably in line with, if I say they're top 5, if they are 5 out of 5, then 5th, 6th is probably correct. But I mean, it's when Florida can make 4th and Houston is stuck in 5th, 6th, that's great for Florida, but a little concerning for Houston.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Agreed.
I think that's more the point I'm trying to get towards. Like Toronto can like jump up from like Toronto were also 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th team. If Toronto can jump up from there to make it to 3rd, granted hometown buff, then Florida have consistently punched above their weight at all points during this entire year. Really have just no negative comments about Florida at all at this point.
I mean, kind of fits the bill with them, right? When we go back to like the power rankings in the preseason, like that was the team I feel like we all pegged as like the team that's gonna shock people, you know, gonna surprise how well they do.
#shock the world.
And I think they have shocked the world. Now, not to you know shine or you know not put I think the rightful team that kind of wins that award in this London Spitfire like out of the light. But I think you know second fiddle to that team. I think Florida has you know shown a lot of success with players that I don't think people necessarily rate that well.
Any final thoughts on Houston before we move on to Florida properly?
Another team I think deserves. It's hard to rate them, right? Like I feel like in one breath we can say that they're both overrated and underrated at the same time. It just depends on who you ask. But I think a team that is like nearing like come up potential, they could break into the top like spots. But that requires like the Glads or like the Shock or Dallas to like really come into the Countdown Cup like struggling. And if what I'm hearing is true when it comes to Scrimbucks and you're talking about, you know, some of the patches, it just doesn't sound like that's the case, right? So I think they're kind of cementing themselves as the gatekeepers right now. At least
who is Houston?
Houston, yeah. I feel like the gatekeepers.
Who are they gatekeeping though? Because they're constantly 5th, 6th. Are they just gatekeeping everyone below 6th place? Like what?
I would
what are they
say like
keeping?
Atlanta and some metas, like they're like trying to like they're keeping them out. It feels like they're like hogging the spot that you might want to put Atlanta in. And that could very well change when we get into Countdown Cup, but like as it stands right now, I feel like that's like the prevailing narrative. It's like Houston is like keeping teams like Atlanta, maybe a team like London out of like the top.
This team is 4th place in season standings,
which is crazy to like kind of.
But they consistently place below that in tournaments.
I don't know.
And here's the point of perspective: Toronto is 6th place and Florida 8th place in season standings. And those two teams, this tournament did better than Houston. Atlanta 7th place, did better mid-season. Can't remember kickoff, but we'll get there. I mean, I can just look it up now. It's not a big deal.
What are you looking at?
Kickoff. Yeah, Florida plays the same as Houston then.
Yeah.
Atlanta plays better than Houston. Kickoff clash as well. I'm not going to talk about Shock, Fuel, or Glads because those are teams we expect to be better.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like I feel like we can get a bit more out of Houston. They do have creative now on the roster properly. We are heading into probably back into a mid-season meta as Yiska has alluded to, which is fucking amazing. Thank God. So if there is a hope of playing double flex support, last stroke creative could be pretty hot. See about that. Yeah, I don't know. We've also, when I say we, I mean generally the fan base has talked about Merit. They've held Merit in very high regard, but seeing Hisu beat him, I think you mentioned this, Joe, but Hisu's kind of like making his name, making his stamp on the Overwatch League currently as a top hit scan player, and taking down Merit, I think is a big step of that. Is a big part of that. He's also kind of, to me, I don't know. He forced a lot of ash over the course of this tournament, which is a good and bad thing. Like, I'm glad he's making it work. He's clearly good enough to make it work, but probably does end up being something that has held Toronto back in the tournament. And I say that as a team that made third. So when I say held them back, what do I mean that I held them back from second or first? I don't know. Maybe that's not entirely fair, but I don't know. I don't even know what my point is. Like, maybe they could have beaten Florida cleaner. I don't know. They clearly had an idea of how they wanted to play the game, and it worked for the most part. Can't fault them for that. Let's talk about Florida before we get to Toronto, because Toronto did place one higher. Now, in fact, we can actually just talk about the Florida-Toronto game, and we kind of like move from Florida into Toronto, because we talked about Florida a little bit already. Unless you guys wanted to kind of cover the London-Florida game as well. We sort of cover that one, kind of. Not in any sort of great detail. We can sort of bounce through the final couple of Florida games where they went to, is it back-to-back map 5s? It was, yeah. They being Florida here didn't play as much of the flex support stuff as I thought, because I remember that was like a predominant prevailing kind of storyline was like, oh yeah, Florida's gonna off meta, and I feel like they didn't really off meta. Like they played a lot of double main support. They played, Hydron pretty much on the Sojin the entire time, outside of a couple of key times. So yeah, I don't know. Like, Florida just ended up playing hard meta.
Just kind of surprising, right? I thought that they gave a lot of teams a lot of trouble in like the qualifying matches with the double flex, even though I agree it's not like conducive of being super successful in the long term like scheme of things. So I think I kind of am gonna have to echo a lot of those like same like not questions, but like it was very surprising that they didn't kind of rely back onto like that same kind of game script that they utilized with the double flex. I think it's I'm constantly surprised by how many people are like, but where's Onimo? It's crazy, like the double flex. It's like I think this is what we've been saying for so long, is like Onimo, for my money, right? I'm gonna wildly speculate here. You can crucify me if you want. I think he is a
I'm getting the cross ready.
I think he's a soft skills player. Like, his mechanics, he's not up to snuff anymore. Like, he's just not that guy. But what I do think he brings, and I think like you see this throughout his like longevity when you look at New York and you look at season 1, and like he finds his way onto teams because I think he like is a good teammate, I would have to guess, or like he communicates very well, or he meshes well. Like, he's just a good guy to have around. But when you need people to like, you need all of the value there, you need every cooldown to matter, and you need them within like fractions of a second. I just don't know if Onimo is like that specific.
So you're saying he's not Lee Jae-gon. He's the opposite of Lee
No,
Jae-gon.
yeah, me thinks that he's not the up there within the upper echelons of main supports.
I will also add, since we're on the topic of support players, yeah, like not just us as well, but like generally when people were talking about Florida heading into this tournament, part of the reason why everyone's down on Florida, because we all expected or assumed that Majid wasn't going to be there because he had the visa issues.
Yeah.
Then they sorted it out, and he ended up. When did he play? What was he didn't play the whole time, did he?
He played online for day 1, but then got there day 2. Like, he arrived day 2.
So what? I didn't watch the game live for day 1. So what? They just had four players in seats and 1 empty seat.
Yep, 1 empty seat, and then they just haven't had him playing online, which is what I kind of assumed was going to happen. But obviously, you never know until it's a game time decision, if you will. Hard to say.
I mean, it seems like, without wanting to be a results biased Andy, like, it seems like it had a bit of a difference. They got rolled by Houston. Guy shows up, and they're beating everybody.
Pop off. Yeah.
So I mean, respect.
I think Florida again is superseding a lot of people's expectations. You look at someone I again can't really glow about him enough. I think he's been so successful this season, and it's really kind of carving out a name for himself in the Rookie of the Year ballot discussion. I think we all know who wins Rookie of the Year, and we don't have to necessarily go over that. But
so he's carving his name out in the who comes second place discussion.
Yeah, when you're fighting for second against somebody like Proper, who is an absolute like demon, right? Like does shit that like shouldn't be possible consistently, even when his team is kind of like pooping themselves, shitting in their opponent's pants, if you will.
Which, by the way,
getting their pants shit in. I don't know.
We're not getting to the shock discussion yet. We will get there, but the shock and by extension because if you hate the shock, you probably don't like Proper either. You know, it comes with the territory. They are now coming out in full force. Like, oh no, shock lost. Probably didn't win. Yeah, he can't be Rookie of the Year. Sorry, guys. I just
that's a weird.
They're just trying to take his name out of contention for not winning the tournament. I just thought it was funny. I don't know about that. I was impressed with the checkmate. I'll say how much.
Yeah,
I was really impressed with the checkmate. I think a lot of people still underestimate a lot of people probably underestimate everybody in Florida.
Yeah.
But I feel like at this point, the whole like Chad mate Ryan situation last year, like that is no longer the defining part of his career. Or like reputation anymore. Like it shouldn't be. Like if that is still for some people, like the define. I'm not talking about from a meme perspective. Like from a meme perspective, yeah, hell yeah, it is. But from like an actual like player reputation, like no, what does this guy actually do and how good is he? No one should be thinking about that situation from last year anymore. I think he's very much solidified himself as like a pretty damn good player. I'm not going to say elite because I think there's definitely a tier of players above him, but like he's done well for the team. I even remember talking to Florida early on, and they were very confident that Checkmate was going to be one of their secret weapons next to someone. Like two players that come flying under the radar that no one expects to be great, but both of them end up being pretty good. So, yeah, Checkmate Gendry. It is one of his key heroes. I remember in Contenders, his two good heroes were like Echo and Genji, right? Very classic flex DPS pool.
Yeah. I'm glad to see it when you look at like the shoes that he had to kind of fill as well coming in for Yaki. It's like, you know,
he's doing better than Yaki. I don't mean individually. Maybe individually. If I
individually.
If I want to get into Hot Wars, maybe I'll say that too.
I don't think it's crazy.
People out there are trying to argue Yaki in top 5 while I'm being like, how about bottom 5? How will we do that? Is that too fire? Is that a little bit too hot? I don't know. Hey. No, Yaki's better than bottom 5. He's at least bottom 6 instead of bottom 5. No, I'm joking. Or am I? Florida. Yeah, like I'm trying to think back. We can actually talk about the Toronto game in a bit more detail now. I'm trying to think if that was winnable enough for Florida, or whether they just kind of hit their limit of like, okay, well, you know, you've overperformed, but this is about as far as you can go. Toronto just a better team here. Because we did go to map 5, and the last map was a 2-0. With Hisu forcing Ash on University. Fucking hell, how does that even work?
I don't know.
Was that one? Forget about the last map, but like, was that series winnable for Florida in your opinion? Like, is it? Or was this like always Florida's destined time to get beat out?
There was just so much pressure in those moments where it's like you're fighting against not only the team but the crowd, and as much as yes, I can sit here and tell you that that's like unquantifiable and you really can't put a value on that from a human perspective, right? Like that's gotta do something to you. That's difficult to just like sit there and put yourself in that moment. I think some people maybe rise to that occasion, but I think most people like it eats at you. It kind of boils you down a little bit. So I have to imagine like not only is that an uphill battle against a team that is kind of like solidifying themselves within this meta as like the third best team when it comes to like, you know, Shock and Dallas. And then, you know, you have to hem and haw about maybe is it London or maybe is it Toronto or is it Houston? Like you're fighting uphill there, but then you're fighting uphill on like terrain that just is uncomfortable for you. So for my money, it never felt like it was winnable from like a realistic standpoint. From a mechanic standpoint, even then, it's difficult, right? It's an uphill fight.
They had a 2-1. They had a 2-1, but that Colosseo ended up being quite one-sided for Toronto, given the final distance.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they had only kind of got met in, I think, the final couple minutes, but yeah. Florida did bring out the double flex support on circuit, and they did win with it, which is surprising.
I mean, it is like a weird look. I think again, I'm gonna hammer this home. You can kind of go back to like pre Summer Showdown, and I think I've like been pretty consistent with this. That when the meta game of practice and like what everybody's practicing are these mirror matchups, it opens up some very loose gimmick strategies to kind of be successful, because again, you're not comfortable playing against it, and the team that is playing it is very practiced on running it. So it kind of self-corrects in some very loose ways. And I think Florida took advantage of that. And I think that goes back to like what we said about them, what we said and kind of marked as an attribute of theirs. We go back to the kickoff clash. We look at Gunba. We look at maybe the Roadhog on Gibraltar as like, oh, that was a little too creative. But they've always found kind of their strengths. They've always found a sense of, I hate to say gimmick, but like they're a gadget team, right? They have these set plays, they have these set compositions.
They have the word mayhem in the team's name. The word mayhem is in the team's name.
It's they're living up to their namesake for sure.
Like,
and I
what's
respect
the most chaotic thing we can do? Oh yeah, play this stuff, whatever that ends up being in whatever particular meta.
I think they spot like a successful leverage. And I think they executed on it as best as they could, given like their tool set. I think they've also been like pretty quick on the transfer market as well. You look at their backline, you look at the supports, maybe even their tanks if you want to kind of go back that far. So I don't know. I can't really praise Florida enough for kind of being a competitive team this season. And this kind of shows it.
Florida.
Yeah, I think. It's weird to evaluate this team because much like London, they are also like overperforming their budget and whatnot. It's interesting to see that there seem to be two camps. Which teams have been more successful in doing that this season? Like I think there are those that believe more in London, and then there are those that believe more in Florida. I think they also have very different approaches. But in this particular tournament, I think there's absolutely a world where they can actually put that stadium and make it a library with a map 5 win. And that would have been arguably pretty important or a pretty good thing for this roster to experience, right? It's once again like it's nuts that it ever gets this close, right? Once again, like if you look at the budget tier list, Toronto at home shouldn't have to go to map 5 against the Florida Mayhem, right? So I don't know. Like I think like if you're in Florida, you can sit there in your green room or in your bathroom, I suppose, and go like, God damn, like it was close. We shouldn't be here, but like, man, was it close to being there. So yeah, I think generally speaking, it's also surprising to me that they did this well in this meta, given their performance in during the regular season matches. Now I'm more excited for like if we're actually going back to stage 2 metas. Now Florida can be cooking, and like we can see the interesting stuff come out there. Maybe play a little bit to the strength that they have. Like, I don't want to see someone just sit on one hero. That's not what I want to see out there.
Well said.
Right? Like, that's not
generally
exciting.
speaking, and also for the individual.
Yeah. Very true. Yeah. Like I want to see them play to their strength, have the ability to swap around, do some unorthodox stuff, maybe hit a little bit
See,
more.
guys, we do like swapping. We do. Genuinely.
Yeah.
It's true.
And like, for instance, sometimes we swap your diapers and YouTube comments. But yeah, I think like Florida with this result, they shouldn't be sad, even though it's hard to not feel sad if you're very close to sending the home team home.
Well, the saddest scenario would be for Toronto would be losing to Florida in map 5 and then seeing Florida get 0-3 swept by Shock easily.
That would have happened, right? Like, we can all agree
that probably would have happened, and that would have been gross.
Yeah.
Sad for sure. Don't want that.
That's how every Spark fan felt in Mid-Season Madness. I keep bringing it up. I'm sorry, I keep bringing it up.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, but good on them. Oh, I'm curious to see how they head on how they do in Cup meta now, which is, by the way, like going to be pretty. I say brief. No, actually, I don't want to get too far into the discussion because we play Cup and then we play the Kariko patch when game actually launches and we head into playoffs. So we got 2 more metas ahead of us, and that Kariko patch should be pretty meaty as well because it won't just be Kariko's release.
Yeah.
But that's a future discussion. We'll get into that. Toronto, they come third at their own event. Probably about as good as you can expect. When you have Shock and Dallas as good as they are, not even a home crowd advantage is going to allow you to beat the Shock unless Shock like really choke, which apparently they only do versus Dallas. No, I don't even know that's fair. That seems that's a little incendiary. But like, yeah, I mean, I what can you really say about this Shock versus Toronto game, or just Toronto in general? Toronto maybe like started out a little shaky by losing to London, but they make a pretty damn good lower bracket run. And you alluded to like an Atlanta-esque run, and I think that's pretty accurate.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very Atlanta Reign looking run.
Yeah. Also seemingly carried by a stellar hit scan performance. That was very Atlanta-esque. Even though it's probably it's fair to say that Atlanta wasn't strictly just Kai, but yeah, I don't know. Like I feel like it wasn't a good weekend for Yiska takes because as we will get to, like I had this Hisu is basically BQB take. I think like this is probably the best.
I think you were right before this tournament.
Yeah, I think this is probably the best Overwatch he has played in the Overwatch League. Like this felt at times this felt like Runaway Hisu. Like put a team like Runaway on my back Hisu. And
it felt like that Hanzo performance last year in play-ins, was it?
Yeah.
Was it playoffs?
Yeah.
Felt like that.
Yeah. So that, and then of course, as we will get to surely, I mean, I'm still living out of my locker with Edison, and his performance improvement. But yeah, I don't know, not an amazing weekend. Also, of course, me trying to predict that London is going to win against Dallas and then falling short there, and now having to. By the way, the guy that bet this with me on Twitter, I haven't forgotten you. I have proof that my Amazon locker didn't have power. My jumping rope is inside of there. To explain, I bet that London is going to win against Dallas. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And now I have to do 10 minutes of jumping jacks for 30 days in a row. But I don't have a jumping jack rope. Sorry, not jumping jacks. Skip rope. So now I have to get a rope, and I couldn't get it today. So I haven't forgotten you. I'll start as soon as I get access to it. But yeah, I think Toronto overall, I mean, this is the level that you should be expecting for Toronto to play at. Now here's the scary shit. This is not your normal performance. This is not your normal performance. This is not your performance where you now sit down with every player on this team and go, let's sign them for a 3-year contract or some shit.
Yes, yes.
Based on the romance of what happened
sell
there.
on that.
No, what you should be doing is you look at the 3 players that are worth anything on this roster. You lock them up maybe, and then, I mean, you get wild. You got to get some head coach craft in there. Like, no offense to Moby Dick. I think Toronto will always have issues competing against other teams in the Overwatch League for top Korean talent, right? And I think they need to open up their choice a little bit. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna throw you a curveball here. Why not look at No Hill? Someone like No Hill. Maybe, especially because here's my argument.
Get some Chinese talent on Toronto.
Yes.
I mean,
because if there is a region that is criminally under-scouted and underserved, despite having 4 Chinese franchises, I mean, Pineapple is basically like a luxurious bench warmer this season, right? Like, my point being, like, if you get No Hill, I think he still has the confidence of players. You can get maybe some departures from Chengdu, some of the stars. I don't know what the situation is there. You can get a couple of other,
You're telling me Toronto's getting leave next year is what you're saying?
I don't like. If that was possible, then you need a head coach. And yes, like, I agree that from the outside, No Hill looks a little bit eccentric and also a little bit off the chain. But come on, like, that situation is unreasonable.
It's good content.
Right?
That's good content.
It's good content, and the thing is, like, you also can't if I did an Asia tier list, they would probably be separated by 2 tiers to the next team. In fairness, right? In order to
a tier list for what? Just skill? What tier
budget tier list?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like, this team, it's not fair to say they spend half of London, because once again, Mike, keep in mind my budget tier list is like player salary plus buyouts. Therefore, like, you can't go half unless you're not respecting league rules. I mean, Halo reported on the team being not paid for a long time. Like, these circumstances, as I understand them, are extraordinary there. So you can't really take whatever happened. If anything, you can look at how many map 5s they drag top teams to and say, all right, like, there's some potential there. Now, of course, right. I think I always thought, and I still believe this, as Toronto defined, you need a head coach that attracts top-tier talent. And there are not many in the Overwatch League that do this, right? I believe, if anything, KDG was a problem for you this offseason in trying to get top-tier Korean players. The other coaches that, like, do attract is, of course, Moon and Krusty. You're unlikely to get those. Like, maybe you can break off another one of Krusty's disciples. Maybe you can convince 9K again or something like this. But, like, there's very few options that you have. There's also legitimately, it feels like very little talent. Maybe Moby Dick can develop into a head coach position. Maybe you believe that they was some breakthrough event and that there is a guy growing into your own. Maybe if you can believe in that, I'm not even mad at you trying that for next season. Also because I think Moby is pretty well liked by players. And generally, I've only heard positive stuff across the seasons, of course, formerly of the Fusion. So maybe that's your guy. It's hard to say. But yeah, I think everything starts with a new head coach. Of course, like, this might sound silly to say to define fans who just had their biggest victory, but that is exactly the type of breeding ground for complacency that you don't want to have going into the next season.
Also, first two metas were not that good for Toronto, were they? So I feel like they peaked during Jotes. We're not playing Jotes anymore. So Hopper's. I'm not saying Muse is the problem, but we're getting back into territory where I don't think Hopper's your first pick to play Ball or Winston. And if we go back to mid-season Madness meta, we're playing Ball and Winston again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we're changing up the team. I don't know what the deal with Finale is. It's probably good for Twilight to go back onto a flex support. But what does Hisu's hero pool look like? Can he just one trick and Ash the entire way through the next meta? I don't know. Probably not.
Yeah. But once again, this is. I know it's a bitter point to make at this point. I think the team should rightfully be celebrated for what they achieved here. Also, I think especially the win against Houston is pretty impressive. The rest.
Oh, I got it. They can still junk buck.
Yeah. I guess. Yeah. No, but bottom line is I think this is probably as good as it gets, and the difference. How did you guys perceive the Shock Toronto game? Because I didn't feel it was particularly close.
Oh, I didn't watch it. I was like, oh, this is not worth watching. This is a Shock victory. It's clear that there is a stratification with the top teams in NA, at least as it stood with the Summer Showdown.
Yeah.
It was Dallas and Shock, and then everybody else. So yeah, I didn't bother tuning in. If it was an upset, I'd catch the VOD.
Without jumping into any hyper specificity of any specific moments, this is what you expect. Shock is the far better team, generally speaking. It's all right, well, they do drop a map to find. I don't think that's out of the question. It's not like Shock consistently 3-0 everybody all the time.
Yeah.
Trying to also pick up control. What was it? This is that meme that Shock always drop control as well. So I'm trying to remember how Kilo performed this year, because I know everyone demonized Kilo over the course of especially the finals.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure, did Hisu diff Kilo or anything? I can't remember.
That I can't remember. I also didn't really watch it.
I think there's a counter jerk. In my mind, it goes like this: everyone's too harsh on Kilo. That's reality. But if you tell me that Kilo is playing at the same level as someone like Happy or someone like Kai or someone like
why'd you bring those guys up? You should just say Lip first and forget about everyone else.
Yeah, it's true.
Say Lip and just end it there. Just don't even talk about anyone else.
Yeah, but it's Lip and then the next guys at the moment. So it's
Lip and the rest is how it looks currently.
I guess if you go tier 1 Lip, then tier 2 the other guys, and then Kilo is probably in the third bracket.
I guess we can just start talking about Shock. We kind of have to talk about them in conjunction to Dallas. I feel like you kind of have to end up talking about both teams a little bit here at the same time.
Yeah.
But focusing on Shock a little bit, what were the results again? They go 3-1 versus Vancouver, right? 3-1 versus Houston. 0-3 versus Dallas. 3-1 Toronto. So all their wins are 3-1. So I'm saying dropping the one map to Toronto, it's Shock drop maps in their victories. It's pretty standard. And then they 0-4 versus Dallas. It's that Dallas game. And what was the regular season game? They lost to Dallas as well. What was the let me find the scoreline. It was 1-3. Because they actually did take one map of Dallas. It was Dorado. They beat Dallas on Dorado in the regular season game. So was it just the finals? Was it just kind of the grand final game that everyone suddenly looked at Kilo in a negative light? Because what was he had that one stat line as well. Was it 1 kill on Coliseum or something?
So few kills. Just kind of invisible. Yeah, I can't recall him being quiet or at least that quiet throughout the tournament. I think it was just like that match in particular. He was just absent, like checked out. And credit to Dallas in that same sense. Like, we talk about Edison being thrown into lockers. We talk about Edison not necessarily living up to the standard that we need him to see Dallas like be super successful. I don't know if I'm ready to, give a Vikings funeral to that narrative, but it certainly wasn't true in this meta. It certainly wasn't true when you see him on Sojourn, being a 2+1 player or a 2-for-1. However you said it before, Avril. I'm blanking on the terminology, but this is a player who gets value every time he's on the field with this hero, and I think like he's really grown into that, almost like a lip, right? Somebody who we rightly criticized at the start of the season on the hero, and is now a playmaker on it, an absolute stud. We'll get to APAC, but it was a mixture, little column A, little column B. Kilo being absent and nearly like almost not on the server, and Edison just genuinely like having an incredible tournament, incredible meta. Dallas like finding their footing, and Shock, sadly, once again, kind of leading up to the tournament, showing a great face, but not necessarily, hitting the ground running, showing up when it counts.
Does this hurt Shock's legacy? It's like because people are very strongly, like when I was, say joke, I wasn't even really joking about the fact that people were like, I don't know, using this as justification to like try and strip awards that probably hasn't even won yet, by the way. Try and strip those awards from probably like, no, they didn't win. So is the fact that Shock hasn't won anything now a problem? Because there's not going to be another tournament until the playoffs, and all this kind of award stuff will happen before then. So this was it. This was the last tournament, and Shock have come second twice.
Yeah.
And what they do in kickoff again? It was let me have a look one more time.
I think they kind of underperformed. I think they like got like fourth.
Fourth. And the team they lost to, I believe they lost to Rain, then they got 0-3 by Dallas. So Dallas seemed to be the team that Shock struggle against. Seems to be.
I don't subscribe to this
really
this Western notion that you need to win awards, right? I don't think you need to like be this like overwhelmingly successful team to win individual awards, right? When you look at proper, just through the eye test, because I know that like the stats lab isn't out yet, but I know there are some people who are tracking them. I know there are websites that are tracking them. Just setting that aside for a moment. There is no other player that is a rookie right now in a role that demands so much of them that does what Proper does. I'm sorry, you're just wrong. You're just wrong. The kid's a demon.
Joe,
the kid is a problem.
What about the people that are sick of DPS players winning awards?
I don't care if you're sick of DPS players winning awards.
What they're saying is they don't care about they don't care about the meritocracy of the award and who the actual best player and most eligible player is for the award. They just care about it not being a DPS player.
Then
so they didn't read the brief. They actually didn't understand the brief behind what the award was meant to be. But
yeah, then you're applying. Then you're not necessarily voting on the award. You're making up your own standard, and I think like you have ulterior motives, right? Like you have very bizarre takes. I'll say that, right? To be nice. Yeah. When you look at the most important rookie, and yes, like in some ways, I also fall prey to my own, advice, let's say, because I think heavy individual awards like Rookie of the Year, like MVP, with the game, with how Overwatch is developed as it stands right now, it's very difficult for DPS to not be the recipients of those. It would take somebody of the caliber of Smurf and the creativity and flexibility and rookie status of someone married together in some Dragon Ball Z fusion dance, but like also Super Saiyan-esque level up to maybe put a tank into the conversation, right? Now we're seeing tanks moved in, I think, a little bit closer to the conversation because of what's demanded of them. And as we increase the hero pools of the tanks and supports, we can have more of those conversations. But as it stands now, flex DPS and hyper flexes in general, when it comes to DPS, should be awarded, and I think will be awarded, these heavy individual awards. If you think otherwise, leave a comment down below.
Well, the problem is tank supports just don't carry the game the way that these top DPSs do. They don't I don't know, entirely change the flow of the game and entirely just skew the result of a game. I'm trying to find the correct word. I feel like I've used some decent words, but I think there's one correct word that I'm trying to get, but I can't find.
The
Yeah,
closest we've seen to your point of a tank player in this metagame kind of enforcing their will, taking over a game is probably Hanbin on Junker.
Taking over, there you go. They don't take over the game in that kind of way.
No, and it's because the heroes don't allow them to, right? Or they don't have the skill set. I don't even think that's necessarily the case. I think it has more to do with how the game's designed. Tank heroes are not meant to take over the game. I think the closest we've seen of that is maybe a Wrecking Ball meta where somebody like Gaga can just be this +1 player, right? And you look at Hanbin and what Dallas was able to do and how many clutch situations that he's able to pull out of his butt, right? That's impressive. That's something you have to mark. But can they do that on so many different heroes? No, they can't. Proper can. People like Fleta used to. Fleeve could. Prophet does consistently. He's on fucking Brig, for God's sake, right? It's just not. These are two different levels of players.
What do you guys think of the current sort of general take? When I say general take, I mean this has kind of been the community narrative of Dallas being the better team-focused team in terms of team decision making, and Shocker, they've been more of an individual kind of team. That's a very rudimentary kind of way people have outlined it.
Yeah,
just thought to get people's takes on that. I think that maybe underplays, that maybe downplays Shock's team playability a little bit, but
or
this does seem this does seem like Dallas's correct meta. It does seem like their goats meta kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
You get to have one of the few metas where a tank is on kind of a carry hero for the most part.
Is it crazy to say that Rush is one of the only coaches that you can look at a style or an archetype of Overwatch and say, if we get that meta, this coach and this coaching staff is going to excel in that way? Because I feel like Rush throughout his entire Overwatch League career has excelled at these really heavy death ball Rush compositions. When you look at the Symmetra stuff, when you look at this if you can get everybody just to be super proactive in one direct direction, I think Rush's teams, obviously just Dallas, but I guess Paris, but that's
I'm so tempted to be snarky about what strategy you mean, just press W. But I will refrain. Continue.
Yeah. I think there are some teams that just don't are I respect them enough to assume that it's not an afraidness or they're scared of pressing W, but they just don't value proactivity to the same degree as Russia's teaching, right? I think his regime really is a proactive style of Overwatch that sets the tempo and puts them ahead, and I don't think it's too short-sighted to say that this is just an Overwatch League thing. I think my point is that it's just around a specific style of composition. That's all.
I think it comes down to Hanbin a lot here as well. You need to get in position and do these kind of things and set that tempo. Your tank player needs to be the tempo setter.
Yeah.
Right. I think having Hanbin be generally considered to be the best jungle queen here and being able to both be supported well and also be able to make those decisions for his team and kind of set the pace allows your team to do what they need to do. From a pacing perspective.
That certainly helps.
Any meta that Sparkle can play Genji is also just insanely good.
Yeah.
That's your Dallas is feasting, right? And he's constantly kind of impressed on other heroes, so I don't think this is lol one trick team. Yes, they found a lot of success with one composition that worked for them.
That I think Sparkle's Tracer is good, but you can say that Sparkle's Genji's elite,
Oh, for
his
sure.
traces maybe like trying to penetrate that tier, but you just don't put his trace
No.
in the same
Can't.
like
No.
holy shit bin as like
No.
some of the other
Yeah.
traces in the league.
Yeah.
You know,
Out of respect to like the actual elite tracers, like just Sparkle just is not of that caliber. It's not to say that he's bad at
getting
tracing.
close. He's the more he plays it, the more I'm like, damn, he is getting close.
He is a natural
But,
playmaker.
He doesn't
That is for
take
sure.
over the game.
No,
He doesn't
definitely
take
not.
over the game in the way where it's just like, bro, how's this guy 1v5? Like, how is this guy unstoppable here? How is like no one can kill this guy and he's just demolishing?
Yeah.
I'm also a little bit worried about their tank situation going to the next meta.
For sure.
Like, you know, what does that look like? Because here's the other thing, because this is a combined discussion of Dallas and Shark. Like, we're talking about Hanbin now, and for what it's worth, you know, I had this guy's preseason. I had this guy's my entire seasonal prediction to be a potential MVP candidate, maybe the MVP. And that's looking pretty good at the moment.
Yeah.
That or proper. I'll fucking take either. Both of those are my breads. Yeah. How does he keep this up? Because it's like, you know, the lack of the midseason madness showings, the Dallas Fuel showings, the midseason madness really hurt them a little bit there as well. Sorry. I kind of want to jump into the hero pool discussion, but I also don't, because I feel like the meta has specifically dictated certain picks.
Yeah.
And as a certain player, you're kind of just beholden to that. So in some cases, Hanbin only plays Zarya and Jungle Queen, but he's only ever been required to play those as well.
Yeah,
Actually,
exactly.
You know what? He also played the Sigma. So the hero pool discussion has merit, but also like it's also a little redundant because he just kind of has to play what the meta requires of him.
Yep.
Having Fearless on his team will hurt that discussion a lot as well, because you know Hanbin's not going to be the guy playing in a Winston or a Ball meta. He might play a Doom meta. I still think his Doom is pretty good. But I think Fearless comes back next stage. So that'll be an interesting situation for the Dallas Fuel again.
Yep.
She also had a really good tournament here on the Lucio. I think that was always a kind of a given that I always kind of figured this guy was going to be pretty impressive.
Yeah.
At this point, I should not be impressed anytime if like support player on a Brig looks good, because Finn didn't even play a single match of Brig before Summer Showdown, and he picked it up like a natural, right? So obviously, guys like Fielder are going to be fine on this hero as well. So I guess the biggest surprise was Edison. I think everyone would have, because we all expected Hanbin to be a bit of a monster. Like I don't think anyone counted Hanbin out, which means the biggest surprise was Edison. And partially, I think maybe something that helps Edison out is that he's not sharing game time with Gurium, so you're not sort of splitting up that game time, splitting up the practice time. Which, when you're trying to focus on a single player to make them good, that's probably the correct call to make.
No, I would agree. I think that, you know, we'll have to. I think my opinion is a little tempered when it comes to Edison. I think that like he had a great tournament, a great qualifying set of matches coming into this tournament. We will see what he looks like. I'm ready to like be pleasantly surprised by the return of Edison in the Countdown Cup and helping to carry Dallas into what looks to be them being the front runners for at least the NA pennant, and maybe even the Overwatch League title. So it's I'm hesitant to pull the trigger and buy all the Edda stonks, the Edda coin, but we will see. I'm hopeful. We'll see what Countdown Cup looks like.
You have to hope that Edison can keep that level, because I mean otherwise you assumed, like, let's say you put him against Happy or Lip or Kai, he gets gapped, right? Yeah. That's what you assumed. This is the first time where I thought, okay, maybe not. Okay, let me actually caveat that further. I think he would get gapped by Lip. But other than that, I feel like you now have a competitive hit scan player, and that is something that Dallas hasn't had in a hot minute. And like arguably ever since XC left, right? So yeah, I I'm kind of also I didn't see this coming at all. Like, I think that's always like a sign of a good system when when a player can come back to old form. And old form for Edison here is like Contenders Edison. Right? Like the type of widow shit that he used to pull. Pretty much, interestingly, pretty much during a similar time when Happy first popped off. So, like, these two gentlemen definitely have kept their skills up. Edison sort of like came back to it. Come on, okay. I'm still skeptical if you can keep that level.
It's hard not to be.
I basically I send Tasmo a selection of lockers that Edison can shove me into.
Sure.
But yeah, great tournament. And it is legitimately scary because a Dallas that has a good flex hits can DPS in a meta like this has very few weaknesses, right? Yeah. And that's why I know the Overwatch League couldn't do it any other way, but like this is the stuff where I'm not sure who wins in the Shanghai Fuel matchup. I feel like it's Shanghai, but I'm not convinced that I think it would probably go map 7.
Yeah.
The way it deserves to go.
Sure.
Back in 2021 form. Yeah, this is a meta for Dallas where, like, you look at all 5 players, you're like, there's no gaps here. There's no deficiencies here. There's no weaknesses here. Like,
It's a liability.
You would have said Edison previously.
Yeah.
But in this tournament, you're just like, no, Edison was more than holding his own.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe a veteran presence playing a stage, that just, this guy's going to be ice cold. Like, it's just, maybe Gurria would have freaked out, but for Edison, it's business. He's fine.
Yeah.
I think it's not just so much like, does he keep the form, but I wonder what the hero pool requirement is going to be. How much Sojourn's still going to get played? What is the prevalence of Tracer? What happens if we get a Tracer Genji meta, right? That's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
And in that case, it's like, well, Sparkle's being a Tracer player. You play Sparkle, Tracer, Doha, Genji, or does Edison play? You know what I mean? You got to get in that territory.
Yeah.
If there is Hitscan, what is it and who's playing it? Maybe it is Sojourn again. Maybe it's not. I would also I wished I caught this game live because I could have checked stats live. And if I check stats live, my hunch is that I don't think Kilo underperformed that badly. Because people will, I don't know, die on the hill of like the one kill on Colosseo. But that can happen a number of ways. For example, you can shoot and hit all your rails, and maybe they're not headshots, which, that's a separate discussion. Like,
sure.
Then again, rail headshots can be a bit RNG as well. Like, you aim for the head, and sometimes it's just, you just don't. You can land your rails, and if they're body shots, proper dives in, he dashes and takes the kill. Somebody else just gets the kill. Like, that's pretty normal. So I don't want to defend it too hard because, like, I know a player like Lip you see on the same Colosseo map versus Sol, he's just fucking giga pounding, right? It's different.
Yeah.
But I also don't think it's like crazy for a Sojourn player not to have like all the kills on the kill feed because it's pretty easy for other players to KS you. I would only be really concerned if I check the stats, which I can't do, but if I did have the stats in front of me and I checked it, and his other stats in terms of damage per 10,
all kind of line up with everybody else,
deaths and all that kind of stuff. If his other stats were really fucking bad, then I'm like, okay, yeah, he did not play well.
Yeah.
But if he had like really good stats otherwise, and he just happened to not have a lot of final blows, then I'm like, yeah, he just got KS'd a lot. Like that's just how it works. So I don't know how far like I want to crucify him. I'm not going to crucify him at all, but I think that maybe it's a little overblown. The whole like one kill thing.
Yeah, definitely.
It seems like Dallas like targeted him pretty hard as well.
Yes.
And just try to run him down. So you're gonna do so much when you're just kind of getting rolled by Dallas every fight. I don't know. Seemed like this is where the team gap kind of comes in a little bit with Dallas setting the pace and being able to move forward, being able to get on top of San Francisco. And Shock not really being able to do the same as often to Dallas. Being the team that gets to initiate first, gets to dictate the pacing of the game. Super important in like a team-based meta like this.
Yeah.
So, final thoughts on the finals? Finals commentary? Commentary on the finals?
I mean, it was exciting. Again, I'll kind of echo
Was it? It was a 4-0?
Well, no, the game itself wasn't all that like good, but like hearing the casters cast that live with the live audience, seeing the players, like it felt like Overwatch. It felt like the game that we all kind of fell in love with again.
Felt like a game of Overwatch.
Enough of this online shit. Like, we need live events. People, like, this is what like connects people to this game. It heightens the experience even from like an online viewer's perspective. Not to mention being in the stadium. So
crowd noise. Yeah. I love that.
So super underrated for sure. But yeah, the game was kind of poo. You know, you rightly kind of like I think it's correct to kind of temper the criticism that Kilo's getting particularly. But I will say it was a pretty bad underperformance. Like it was not a good day at the office for Kilo, and that's to be expected sometimes.
There's no world where I'm saying Kilo plays super well.
Sure,
that's not justified at all. I think it's overblown, but I do think it's look, it is justified, but it's definitely overblown. Like both of those can be true.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%. So yeah, it again, I left Jotes again, hoping that it's not necessarily continuing, but as a final send off to it, in the most boring meta, the most stale, rigid, whatever you want to call it, I still leave the Toronto venue as an online viewer, hopeful for the future of this game because of what we saw on that stage. Even in like a boring game where you kind of like write it off already, like it still was good. It was a good experience to view it. I don't know.
Can I just say how blessed it is that the best part about the finals was that Dallas were kind enough to give us the lowest amount of exposure to jokes as possible. Like they made sure that we watched the smallest quantity of jokes as possible. And for that, Dallas, I applaud you. Thank you, Dallas, for not making us suffer through more jokes than we have to.
Very based.
Also, people are gonna call out Kilo and Coliseum, be like, "Why did he feed in that first fight? Why was he in the middle of nowhere?" I think he just kind of like, he was trying to disengage. Maybe he just went the wrong way and he kind of fucked up. But yeah, it is a mistake, but it's it's one of those. I don't know. It's not good, but I also think it's not as like crazy bad as people are making it out to be. I'm defending him a lot here, but I just think like, yeah, he didn't have a great performance. But I think people are demonizing him a little too hard here. Also, let's talk about the fact that Shock now in 2 back-to-back finals go down 0-3 and are forced to be in a reverse sweep scenario. Now, versus Glads, they actually picked up 2 maps. Maybe should have gotten a third if they didn't C9. Versus Dallas, they just get swept.
Yeah. That's it's a problem that Shock has had since the kickoff clash, like LAN environment, where I believe it was against the Justice, where they go down, right? Like they're always like fighting back from being down. And I think like that is a problem to explore in a very like general analysis way that like is hard to pinpoint because it's throughout a variety of metas where we come off a very rigid one. It felt like this was also the case when it came to Mid-Season Madness as well. And then obviously Kickoff Clash. Like this team just, for whatever reason, like has to battle back in a series. And I just don't think that that's like sustainable in the long term. Like that's just not a good sign.
Yeah, hard to do, especially under pressure. Second time being there in the finals, you're like, shit. We finally made it back in the finals. We don't have Glad standing in the way. But now, oh shit, we can't get past Dallas.
Damn it. So in that way, I wouldn't be surprised if Glads kind of shoot up and like move Shock back down to like third rung of those like top 3 teams. Like it would not wouldn't put it past the Gladiators to kind of have a meteoric end of season rise back up, be back in time, be back in time for playoffs, and then really start to add a lot of question marks to the Shock. It's wouldn't put it past them.
I'm gonna add one more. I'm backtracking a little bit here, so bear with me. I'm gonna add one more little statement towards the whole MVP discussion. Not that I'm officially throwing my hat in the ring, even though it sounds like I'm already there. It's a foregone conclusion. Trust me, I'm still gonna wait it out as long as I can. For those that caught up with any CDL, which might not be anyone here, but the CDL MVP, the regular season MVP of the CDL, was Celium from the Atlanta FaZe. And Atlanta FaZe didn't win a single tournament this entire year. And I believe they had 4 tournaments before the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And Atlanta FaZe came second place 3 times out of those 4 tournaments. And so the league MVP was a player that didn't win a single fucking tournament this year. Just saying. For Call of Duty. It's not that uncommon. We had Leave last year in the same sort of deal.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see how that goes. I don't think...
don't need a
if
ring.
anything, I got to say, Shock coming second twice in a row is still a pretty good achievement.
Sure.
So we'll see how it goes there. I do also wonder if Hanbin sort of enters a little late again, because he was kind of there early on.
He feels on the cusp, yeah.
Then he was he wasn't there for mid-season. Now he's kind of back again. Now we'll see what happens. I even said it quite publicly. Let's just wait to see what happens in Countdown Cup.
Yeah.
Right. Let's just see what the regular season games, how they go, the plans as well. Let's just see how they go first before we really lock into anybody. Final thing I have to say about this final is just that, I guess I'm just disappointed that Shock didn't look more competitive. I think we all wanted to see Shock be more competitive than this.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if they won a single map in the first 3 for a change in the finals. But Dallas were too good. Dallas was simply too good this meta. And I made this comment on Twitter as well. It's like we're back in 2021. Dallas win NA, Shanghai win APAC, and same 2 teams from last year.
The 2-horse race once again, and it's so exciting that that's the case. And I know that maybe people are fatigued when it comes to this narrative, but just to know that we're on the cusp of this game hitting its early access release, we're getting a hero like Kiriko, eyes are going to be put back on this game, and we're having what it should be one of the best rivalries coming into playoffs, reimagined once again.
Definitely the best inter-regional rivalry.
Yeah.
The best inter-regional rivalry for sure.
The content that can be made around that, it's exactly what we need, and what season 1 didn't have, because it was just so fresh, right? Now we're in season 5, if I can count. And we have those established narratives, those rivalries that yes, we have the winners of NA and the winners of APAC, and they're colliding like they did in the past. In this brand new game with all the eyes on it, I think we're seeing some trajectories, we're seeing some trends, and I think we're only going up. I hate to sound very hopium or copium huffing, but it's exciting. It's an exciting end to Jotes to line us up for the future.
All right. Well, I mentioned APAC. Let's dive in. Much smaller bracket. We don't have to go through it game by game, but let's just sort of briefly touch up on what happened. So Guangzhou Charge came in. We'll just talk about the team by team, actually. That probably makes more sense. Guangzhou Charge, 4th place. Didn't win a single map in their entire way through. They lose to Shanghai 0-3, lose to Fusion 0-3. I'll just say straight up that I don't... I think they run their course. This is one of those teams that, they run their course. They look good in the regular season. I don't think it's crazy that they lose to 2 teams like this. Shanghai, clearly the best team in Asia. Fusion, scary looking team on an upswing. MN3 looking like a beast. Charge were clearly the 4th best team here. They were the weakest team in this top 4. They didn't win a single map. I don't even think that's crazy. I don't even think that's an unbelievable or unreasonable result. I think them going 0-6 is, I don't want to sound mean, but that's probably a correct result line. That's probably a correct finishing scoreline for them.
Yep. Sadly, it doesn't get any more cut and dry than that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, let's be honest. It is like, I think you guys were higher on Charge, if I recall correctly, right?
I was. I can tell you that.
Do you think
High in
they
what sense? 'Cause, like,
met their threshold? I think you, like, if I recall correctly, you probably would have had them above Philly, right?
I had them beating Philly in the lower bracket. I had them losing very convincingly to Shanghai, beating Philly in a close game, and then getting mollywopped by
I can't
Seoul.
remember what I had. But I personally felt going into it, especially after looking at their Shanghai game, I'm like, no way, they're not doing anything versus Fusion.
Yeah.
Because Fusion are looking really hot. Fusion always have this kind of big upswing into a tournament
Mhm.
3 times in a row
True.
now.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but as soon as Fusion get close to tournament, they get onto an upswing.
They do come alive.
And when that happens, man, Charge got no shot. This just isn't going to happen. On an individual level, Fusion are outskilling them. On a team level, they're outplaying them. I mean, some of the tragedies you saw from the Charge as well is just like, man, this is kind of embarrassing. The Midtown C9, it was egregious.
Yeah.
They just stepped off. Jimmy and Choi just both simultaneously stepped off the card in OT and just no pressure, no input from Shanghai at all. Shanghai had nothing to do with it. Charge just literally stepped off. Like, I don't know what else to say. They literally walked off like Youngjin walked off the card on Dorado all those years ago. Just fucking walked off. That's it. That's literally what happened. And then they lost. I don't think they would have won the map anyway, but
No.
man, they did not give themselves any favors.
Yeah, that was blood curdling. Like, sheesh. Yeah, I don't know. Would Spark have delivered a better match here?
Probably not. Spark looked pretty tragic in this meta as well.
Yeah.
By the way, I can't remember if I said this on the broadcast or not. I can't remember which one it is. I believe Fusion set a new record on Hollywood Attack of all time versus Charge. No, don't get too excited. It wasn't the fastest record ever. It was a tied equal second fastest ever. So once again, Fusion, they can't fucking help themselves. They even get second in that. Tied second ever fastest time on Hollywood versus the Charge. It's gross. Like, what do you do if you're the Charge? You were just losing that hard. You were losing that fucking hard versus everybody.
Yeah.
I don't know. And Fusion were the clear third best team in this tournament as well. So it's not like Charge got unlucky in the draft for who they play against, their opponents. I don't think they would have done. I think if they played Seoul, it would have been a 0-3.
Yeah.
So they were just destined to go 0-6 here, no matter who they played, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very likely.
It sucks that like APAC is like very it's getting like to a point where I think Shanghai eventually is just going to run away with this, and that's not to say that's not to Seoul's detriment, because I think they are the only team that can kind of keep up with them. But it's like not the first time that we've seen Seoul kind of slow down, right? Like, yes, they have a a star added to their banner, that's for sure. But then when you come into midseason, they kind of like slow down a little bit. And this again felt like they started very strong, and then they come into the tournament, they go 3-2 with Philly. It's a close game. Like the gas seems to be running a little empty, and maybe that's because they don't have profit on DPS. I don't know, hard to say, but. It feels like Shanghai's gone.
I don't buy that, because Stalker played well. Stalker was playing very, very, very well.
Sure.
So it's not like missing profit was the issue. I just think the other team's caught up. So before we can decide, let's talk about Fusion first. Fusion is one of those teams that caught up. So Fusion had back-to-back long-ish series versus Seoul. Even the regular season game, I believe, was pretty lengthy. If I check that again. Yeah, regular season game was a 5-mapper versus Seoul. They lost. And then tournament, they lose to Seoul in the upper bracket semis. They lose to Seoul again in the lower bracket finals. So it's 3 games in a row they lose to Seoul, back to back to back. 2 of them went to Mat 5s. The last one went to a Mat 4. Fusion, we already talked about them just 3-0ing the charge. Not too much fight from the charge there. And yeah, I mean, this is Fusion on an upswing, but still not quite catching up to Seoul. So Seoul is still the clear better team. But this time, at least, not by like an insane margin. You have to really credit Fusion, who did not look particularly strong coming into this meta. I believe their qualification process was like, they nearly didn't make it. What was their record? 2-4? Yeah, they lost to like everybody. It was not close. They lost to Chengdu 3-0, and then they lost to Shanghai 1-3. Actually, that's kind of, maybe expected. Who did they beat? Actually, they beat Valiant. That was a 3-2, by the way. They nearly lost that. They could have gone 1-5. They were so close to going 1-5. And who else did they beat? They beat Hangzhou in the last week. And Hangzhou was checked out. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hangzhou is a sad time. It is a bad time talking about Hangzhou.
Oh, it doesn't get much better. We'll wait till next week.
So Philly beat literally the bottom 2 teams. There were 2 teams that went 1-5, and those are the 2 teams that Philly beat. And then they get past Chengdu via a tiebreaker.
Yeah.
By 1 map, a differential of 1 map, -4 versus -5, literally. So that's how close the margins were. But I think they deserve this time around. They 100% deserve to be here.
Yeah.
They also deserve to be there mid-season, considering Chengdu also started losing towards the end, whatever. And Fusion did the best out of the APAC teams in mid-season. I give them that. That's totally deserved. So they've deserved it twice now, technically speaking. And Chengdu, they've let it slip through their fingers twice now as well. This time it's definitely 100% Chengdu. Last time you could have argued like, oh yeah, but Fusion had the extra points, blah, blah, blah. This time it's like, there's no excuses. Chengdu literally had the lead. They could have secured it. They just needed to not lose one. They just needed to win one of the last 2 games, which was versus Guangzhou and Valley, and they lost both. So what can you do? So Fusion barely making it into tournament. They do. Yep. They look like the clear 3rd best team here, which versus Seoul and Shanghai is always an achievement. And look like they have a very reasonable game versus Seoul, like a very close game, really pushes Seoul. It's impressive by the Philadelphia Fusion. Honestly, MN3 is just looking phenomenal. He actually makes Zest look like a very average player. So, I spend a bit of time defending Kilo, but at the same time, when you look at guys like MN3 on the Sojourn, you're like, holy fuck.
Yeah. So, it's a hero that has a lot of potential to, like, again, kind of take over games like we've been talking about. And it's like, if you don't have somebody showing up on such a huge role for your team, such a big weapon, you're going to catch some flack, that's for sure. As much as he's getting, it's up for discussion. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you there. You need to have somebody impacting that weapon for sure. Also,
I think Soldier's forced too much Fitz Ash. I do. I think Ash is just overrated.
I can't agree more. Like it's not
as much as the Toronto fans. As much as the Toronto fans will try and convince you because they're Stockholm syndromed, they'll try and convince you that Ash is the truth.
It's them. It's Houston.
I think she's good on some maps. I don't think she's awful.
100%.
Like when you're trying to one trick her everywhere, that's a bit of a problem.
Can't do that.
And I feel like Fitz was like almost in that category. Fitz was trying to do a Hisu here and just trying to one trick one hero.
Yeah.
And you just didn't have the explosivity of the Sojourn.
Yep. You have a hero like that again, I hate to kick a dead horse, that can take over games, that can put you +1, that like is just an inherent playmaker. Or you have a hero that just kind of like has constant uptime in terms of like damage pressure, but like is a target. Like you are leaving yourself open to be very vulnerable. And like we have teams in the league that will punish you for doing so. It feels very clear, at least to me, that like you have like impactful players.
So I don't really know what let Fusion down here. It's like a little hard for me to quantify. It's at the end of actually, no, I do know why Stalker was fucking crazy. Yeah, that's why Stalker was a fucking disgustingly good play. This is why I will never buy. No one can bring up like, oh yeah, it's because Prophet was on DP or something. No,
Yeah.
Stalker was a machine on this team, so that was not the problem. Unless unless Prophet has a better hit scan than Fitz and replaces Fitz, that's not the problem.
Yep.
In fact, I was gonna say I think Soul's supports were better than Fusion's, but I don't think that's a hot take. I think most people agree.
Yeah.
Even
And they're
Prophet on
like-
the Brig. I take
they're only
Prophet on
gonna
the
get
Brig
better.
over Aim God.
Yeah.
You're not gonna see Prophet on the support again for the rest of the season because we're heading back into normal metas now. But yeah, so yeah, Fusion. I think they didn't win in the support department. Their DPSs were good, but Zest actually got outperformed by Stalker, which is kind of big. So despite M3 beating Fitz, that's only one player. I think Smurf and Fury traded pretty evenly. I wasn't particularly super impressed by either player on the Jungle Queen, if I'm going to be honest with you. So they just played.
Okay.
They were both just kind of
Average,
even.
normal.
Neither player like super impressed me. To me, this was like the Stalker versus MN3 kind of battle.
Yeah.
If I was gonna really just simplify it into one matchup.
Let me ask you this about Philly. I know that coming into this tournament, one of the big prevailing like talking points was like the difference between like MN3 and Carpe, and like there just wasn't the oomph, the impact that Carpe had when it came to the hit scan DPS. Do you think that narrative's kind of being put to bed now with MN3 kind of being the bell cow hit scan for Fusion?
I think this would have been like a little better for. This would have been a little bit more defensible for Carpe if MN3 wasn't so good on Sojin, because
Right.
the narrative at the time was, okay, well, MN3 is your sniper player. But when it comes to Sojin, Carpe is probably the better Sojin, right? He's had more game time on Sojin. He's been your normal Sojin player this year over MN3. That's the guys that we had all been kind of working with. Then MN3 just comes out on the Sojin and just infinitely looks better than Carpe. You're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So Carpe can't hide behind that one anymore. That just means MN3 is better on everything. Like, if MN3 is better on the Sojin, then there really isn't any heroes left where you're like, you should probably play Carpe here. Before anyone brings up Tracer, no, not even that. MN3 clears Carpe and Tracer as well, I promise you.
Yeah.
Not that any of them will play it. Zest is your first choice for Tracer, first and foremost.
Yeah.
But your second choice for Tracer is definitely MN3. So at this rate, I don't see, unless it's a double hit scan where you bench Zest, I don't see a situation that Carpe comes back. Sadly.
Yeah. Should not. I don't know what this team is doing, because sometimes Carpe just comes back anyway, and they shouldn't have played in the early in the meta
Right.
based on what we've seen anyway. But yeah, I agree.
So yeah, Fusion actually nearly get a reverse sweep versus Soul, but couldn't quite get it there. I think Soul made some interesting choices as far as map choice goes, because if I'm not mistaken, Soul picked one of Philly's maps, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to figure out which one it was again. Yeah, Soul actually picked New Queen Street versus Philly, which seemed like a mistake, and they lost that versus Philly as well. And then here's the crazy thing, and this is in the second Soul Philly game in the actual bracket. Philly picked Colosseo versus Soul, despite being dumpstered by Soul in the regular season game just 2 matches ago. And Jin just picks that versus Soul, and then they just get dumpstered again. It's 58 meters to 111 meters. And Fusion just like they C9'd a payload flip, the robot flip on the actual progress. I don't think that ended up being a huge deal, but it's still egregious, but didn't end up being the difference maker because Soul capped further anyway. But just stuff like that. I don't know. Yeah, I thought that was a really strange pick. I think Fusion could have taken that to 5 maps if it wasn't for the Colosseo pick. They should have gone back to, in my opinion, they should have gone back to New Queen Street. So some question. That's not the first time that Fusion have made, in my opinion, poor map selection. I think I called them out for one of those in mid-season madness as well. I was like, what is this map choice they're doing? This is crazy. Let's talk about Soul then. They had 3, just like the Philly, games. They had 3 matches versus Shanghai in recent matches. Qualifying game versus Shanghai ended up being a 3-0. I think that was a bit disappointing, but it just kind of at that point you're kind of shown how much of a monster Lip is once again.
Yep.
Pulls out the Widowmaker and Gibraltar as well and just like kills everybody in the last fight. Is the better Sojin. I think this is another situation where Fitz is just playing second fiddle to Lip again. That's been Fitz's entire career, playing second fiddle to Lip, and he can never escape from that. He's always the second best Ashe, the second best Widow, the second best Sombra, the second best anything that Lip plays that they both share. And it's another 3-0 in the upper bracket game. And then finally a 4-2.
Yeah, again, I think that like Shanghai, while if the meta forecast leads more closely towards what stage 2 kind of gave us, I have to wonder if maybe Shanghai, maybe has to pump the brakes a little bit, because I do think that while yes, like Lip has been an absolute stud, talk about a +1 player. I don't know if you can like consistently just run Who Are You, right? Like when you don't have just a dedicated Genji meta, you have to put back in Flutter. And I'm going to be completely honest, I have not thought that he's had a great season thus far. I think he has his moments, but I mean, yeah, it might be that game plan, and I'm not mad at it, but I don't know if we're going to see a title defense if that's the case, right? Like we've got a couple meta gambles left to go. We've got, some cards left to flip. So I do think that Shanghai is running away with this, but it could be a little bit closer than maybe I'm giving them credit for. Maybe Fleta can get it together. I don't know. Hard to say. Seoul has some ground to keep up, and I think it kind of comes down to Fitz, right? Like what I'm hearing is true, and I think this has been the case for a while, like you're saying. Like Fitz just isn't of the same caliber. Is that fair to say? When you look at somebody like Alep, you look at like MN3, when you look at like Happy, let's say, right? Like these elite Sojourn players, like Fitz just doesn't.
He ever so often gets close to tasting elite status. But I feel like he does just barely sit outside the border.
Yeah.
He sometimes gets close. Like, man, Fitz is really playing out of his mind. And then you watch a game of Lip, it's like, oh no, actually, this is what playing out of your mind looks like.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on a second, let me just change my standard of what that is.
I don't know. Like Eric just highlighted, like a pretty crazy status. Like the last 9 matches, Shanghai has only dropped 3 maps, and 2 were during the final. So in the last 8 matches, they lost 1 map. That is
the entire stage, the whole stage, they only lost 3 maps total
against
and 1 in the regular season.
Yeah,
so they would have had a. I mean, I was joking they were going to go 4-0 in the finals as well and just have a golden stage, but a flawless stage. But they dropped 3. I appreciate that this went to 6 maps. I think it's kind of hype. I appreciate it went to 6.
Yeah.
At Colosseo, by the way, was an insane map. That's one that's worth a rewatch.
Mm-hmm.
Seoul Shanghai finals, Colosseo was actually super tight. And that's actually, you know what? To Fitz's credit, that's the map that he popped the hell off. That's the map where you're like, okay, well, Fitz is control. He's in control currently. He shut down 2 Who Are You Blades in a row, if I'm not mistaken. Who Are You pulls Blade, instantly deleted by Fitz, right? If Fitz doesn't hit those shots, I think Seoul don't win the map.
Yeah.
Simple as that. So, as much as I'm saying Fitz did not play as well a Lip, that map he did shine. Fitz definitely shined on Colosseo. It was a big part of why Seoul were still alive in the series at a 2-2 scoreline after 4 maps.
Yep. Do you think that there's if you had to staying with Seoul for a moment, is there any meta that you can kind of draw up, like the most ideal meta for Seoul that would put them back into deep playoff, maybe even title contention? Like what's the ideal situation?
Mid-season Madness was great for them.
Okay.
Because they had Prophet Tracer, Smurf on Winston, just play full dive, They great at dive. They underperformed versus the NA teams, but
Sure.
otherwise they were they were legitimately better than Shanghai in that meta.
So let me pose
mostly because I think Flitter was not very good on Tracer, whereas Prophet is.
Then are you of the opinion that like Seoul maybe is either a lot closer or maybe even the favorite to kind of come out of Countdown Cup as like the top APAC team? Just in terms of like power standings, not in terms of actual standings.
If Shanghai can't figure out their tank and who are you / Flitter situation, then maybe.
Okay.
At this point, I'm fully trusting Lip. Lip was also not amazing in midseason compared to him now.
True.
So like at this point, I'm like fully bought in for Lip. I think like if he keeps, and I think he will keep this up because we've seen him do this before.
Yeah. True.
You know, he's going to be the guy on the team that you have to be worried about.
True.
I don't know. I think Seoul Dynasty have a bounce back coming up because of a good meta for them coming back in. But also, I think a 2-4 loss in the finals is not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah,
in a game where, like, I think the expectation was they were going to get 4-0'd. The fact that they got 2 maps when, you know, it looked like they were supposed to get 4-0, I think is a big achievement.
Yeah.
And like I said, like the 2 maps they took away, which is the Control and the Colosseo, especially the Colosseo is like super well earned, you know, extremely tight margins and like requiring very precise hero plays, which did occur for Seoul to allow them to win. The second controller they actually C9'd on one of the rounds, downtown, I believe. It's a 99-99 fight. All 10 players are alive and the map's just over. They just didn't touch. It's just how it is. So there was a C9 there for Seoul, which is kick W.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, what I'm interested in with Seoul is the whole flex support switcher rule, right? Like, do you guys, how do you think Creative and Iris or Iris match up? Is this an upgrade for Seoul?
I think the way that you kind of put it, I believe we've talked about this on the show before. I felt like AVRL had some thoughts here as well. That Seoul is getting a more flexible flex support across like the heroes that like we've seen and been like staple like flex support picks.
Houston's getting a better one trick.
Yes, Houston's getting like a better like role player when it comes to like Ana specifically. And like Creative's great at Ana, but like it's far and away his best hero. So when you don't have that, it's adding potency to Houston's gamble. But in terms of like 1-for-1 trades, it feels like Seoul's getting the better end of the bargain, just baseline, right? They're getting a starter, they're getting somebody that's a little bit more flexible, they're getting somebody tested on a number of heroes throughout the last few years, going all the way back to contenders. I would have to say Seoul is winning that trade a little bit.
Yeah, I don't hate that. That's also one of the growth factors for me to see. Like, I mean, it depends on what kind of supports come back, right?
Sure.
If you got some BAP, of course, like that's Iris Playground.
Probably only one map. You're probably only playing that on circuit or an escort map.
Yeah. I mean, I'll keep my ear to the ground if it actually went back to full meta, like stage 2 meta, and everyone's also playing their own flavor.
By the way, just to finish off the Shanghai Seoul discussion, you guys know how people harp on the stat line of Kilo only getting 1 kill in Colosseo. Let me bring forth the opposite stat line.
Yeah.
Lip on the final map Circuit Royale only died 1 time.
Oh goddamn!
Jesus.
Whole map on 1 death.
How many kills?
And that one, it's too many. A fuck ton of kills. And that 1 death was only because of the mandatory A point spawn camp that you have to do. And because they're committed to the spawn camp, everyone dies, right?
Yeah.
That was the only death. So if it wasn't for the spawn camp, he actually might have had 0 deaths.
Damn.
Or if he played the spawn camp more selfishly, which he's not going to do because he's a team player as well. But if he played that more selfishly and backed out, he would have lived. But he dies during the mandatory phase where you have to die because you're fully committed to a spawn camp. And aside from that, he just doesn't fucking die. It's just continually first blood shuts down Soul like every turn. Destroy Stalker. Because here's the other thing. Talk about like Fitz controlling Who Are You and Coliseum, which by the way was only just one map. Lip was just doing that to Stalker the entire series. And when you shut down who I think at that stage was Soul's best player in the final, which is Stalker. Best player in the entire tournament, I would say. Stalker's just been lights out for Soul that entire tournament stage. When Lip shuts that guy down, Soul have very few options left to play through. Yeah. And the cherry on top is just, the final fight where Void just gets a 4-man rampage versus Smurfs like 2. It's over. It's very over.
Yeah.
And they full held, I think, Shanghai full hold Soul, and Shanghai fully cap Circuit, and then they full hold Soul. So yeah, the last map was not close. That's the 4-2. And I think Shanghai very clear, despite losing 2 maps, we're very clearly still just the better team by far.
Yeah. We will see. I think it's a fun send off for Jotes. I don't think anybody's upset. I'll say this.
Fun's charitable.
Yeah, fun is charitable. That's fair. I would probably have liked Jotes a little bit more if like I had a way to like view the top down, right? Like these fights are just a little too hard to kind of conceptualize or like spot like differences without like a top down like mini map view. And I think if you got that, I think like it would be a little bit more interesting.
If you require a mini map to follow the action and for it to be enjoyable, then the meta has failed
not
already.
Great. Yeah.
Then you're already on the. It's like you're already on a pathway of just you. If you even have to ask that question, that's kind of fucked.
Yeah.
For everything.
Totally.
All right. Final thoughts on Shanghai Seoul finals, the whole tournament stage, everything. Before we wrap up.
Excited to see some more heroes. Excited to get out of a rigid meta. It's not Overwatch when it's rigid. So
it's not Overwatch when you don't hero swap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I hope we get a rest of the season with a Void meta. Because I mean you saw that, Joe, right? Like that Void announced his retirement.
Oh, I didn't catch that. Is this his last season?
This is his last season.
Yeah.
Damn, that's an end of an era for sure.
Yeah.
Talk about somebody who
he won though. I gotta say he's gone out on high. He literally wins the stage as a starting player. Like I think you take that.
Yeah.
The thing
is he finishing the season?
Yeah,
he's finishing the season.
Okay.
But yeah, like that's legitimately a guy that if you talk about GOATs of this game, you have to have him in consideration. He's been doing it too long, has had too many trophies and like successes at any given point in his career, has been truly elite. Like you got to think about Void in some way.
Yep. Agreed. Absolute legend of the game. It'll be sad when the season ends and we have to say goodbye to.
I think he won't be the only one. I think there's more retirements from Shanghai incoming.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of reaching the end of the contract period for a lot of these players. Even if they're on 1+1s, 2+1s, whatever. Like that 2 to 3 year period is coming to an end because a lot of this roster was signed in 2020, right?
Yep.
So that 2 to 3 year period is it's about to finish, which is really really sad because I think. Man, what an insane run. It's not even finished yet. We don't even know what the full extent of the rest of this year is going to be. So, will they get another Void meta? It's hard to say, man, because I think you're going to run into the same problem with Fearless in your team. When you have Fate in your team and we're getting back into Winston Ball, Void is not going to be your starter. He just isn't.
Yeah.
So, both now, the unfortunately, the way the meta works is for the winning teams like Dallas and Shanghai, they have to answer the question of, like, how do they navigate the next meta, which is probably the mid-season madness meta again. They just go back to what they were doing in mid-season, even though both the teams were not great in mid-season. Like, what does that look like? That's kind of scary for both teams, despite winning.
Yeah.
So, we will see. And you know what else? We will also discuss next meta stuff. We'll talk about the patch notes. We'll talk about everything Count No Cup ready. We're even going to talk about roster moves because that's something we didn't cover
True.
that today. Didn't really have time to cover that. So we'll talk about all of that next episode, which is coming really soon. So on our normal episode time, this was a special recording just to make sure that we covered the Summer Showdown because I know we missed out. So yeah, thanks for hanging out. This ended up being another long episode. It always is. Always has been.
Ends to be.
Always will be.
262. See you later. 263 next. Goodbye.
Peace.